Randy was very excited about having both you guys here today. Something about rock stars in his midst, you know? So what's your background, Keith? Where are you from?
Well, I grew up on a farm not too far away from Eisenhower High School.
Okay.
And I was there till I was left the house when I was actually quite old, actually, and bought my own place out in Cable Hollow, Russell.
So you're one of those golfers at Cable Hollow?
No, I do not golf. It's I've lived up there for 48 years, and I think I've golfed once or twice.
Well, you kept your sanity because of that.
Probably, yeah. I see a lot of pretty disappointed people when I ride my bicycle past there quite often, and yeah. So.
Probably one of them. So at some point, though, you get the bug for racing. Was that something in your family? Had your parents been involved or exposed you to some of that?
No. Actually, it was my older brothers. Okay. They were 10 and 11 years older than me, and they would take me to Skyline, the old Skyline Speedway.
Yep.
And I was like 10 or 11 years old.
What year were you born, Keith?
45.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, that was in the mid 50s, early 50s.
Early 50s,
yeah. And then when Skyline closed, and they started taking me to State Line.
Just a spectator, right? Your brothers weren't involved other than spectators.
They just liked the races.
So when you're sitting in the stands, the dirt's kind of enveloping you, 'cause that's what happens at State Line.
Yeah.
Was there a one or two drivers out there who you would root for or against?
I like Dean Layfield.
Good choice.
Yeah, he was my man.
Yeah.
Dean, well, he had two cars. He had a Ford, and then he had a Studebaker. And actually, I raced against his nephew when I went up to Allegheny Mountain Raceway and raced up there. His name was Joe Layfield. And one day, just out of curiosity, I just asked him, I says, well, Dean was his uncle. I says, why did Dean race Studebakers? And he said, because he had a Studebaker dealership. So he raced the old Hawks.
Yeah.
You know, very little video on State Line, but there's a heat race, and you can't mistake that Hawk.
Yeah.
You know, so he was my guy. Yeah.
What was it about Dean Layfield that kind of you said, he is my guy?
Well, in a way, my parents owned a Studebaker for one thing.
Okay.
So I related to that for one thing.
Yeah.
I loved his number, 9/16.
Yeah.
After the size of a wrench, you know.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. So that was I know I was there in '56 when it opened, but I don't think I was there the first race.
Okay.
But I know
that
I was
you would have
there.
remembered because it was a rainy day and everybody got stuck.
Yeah, I think it was a pretty decent day when my brothers took me up there, and yeah, so they were more Squirt Johns fans.
Yeah.
Of course, I had to be opposite of them, you know, but it was okay. That was for a long time ago. '56 was there was some. Emery Mann had the '57 Chevy, and he did really well with it, and so.
In your neck of the woods was Emery Mann, who was from Warren, Pennsylvania. Was that a draw at all? I mean, just kind of more local than others.
Well, there again, as far as Emery was concerned, I liked his number, the 8-ball.
8-ball,
yeah. Ended up working for him for a while.
Oh, did you?
Not very long, but
yeah.
I worked as a mechanic for him, and when he was running the Dodge Dart, and so he's a nice guy, but not so much when you worked for him. He was a little tough.
Yeah.
But
That's often the case.
he was the boss.
He was the boss, that's right, and certain things had to happen. So when he, so at some point you get the bug and you say, I think I can do what those guys are doing. What was the aha moment, that moment in time?
Well, I was in the Marines, and I was in Vietnam, and after that, I came home, and I don't know, I became very good friends with a guy named Gary Raleigh, and his parents had been announcers at the old Dickie Bend Speedway, and so Gary had a lot to do with racing, and he thought, well, let's build a racer. So we built a racer in Swede's barn.
Ah.
Yeah, it was a 1960 Oldsmobile. And why we built an Oldsmobile is more than I know. I guess it was sitting on the back lot in Midtown Motors, and I bought it for $50. And the only thing that was really wrong with it was a clutch was toast in it, and we had to, but that car was not very good. That was not very good, and it ended up with a '61 Dodge Dart, which is if you go to a lot of car shows, you're not going to see one. A very rare car. Yeah. But I got a 383 high performance out of a Super B. And so, which was a lot of engine, for the day. And that was a good race car. That was a lot better than the olds.
So what was your number?
Well, that's another story. Sweet and I, we're all Richard Petty fans. So I didn't want to take Richard's number, but we doubled it to 86.
Okay.
So that was the idea behind that.
And he came very close because he just switched him around. 34, which was his basketball number, rather than 43.
Right. Yeah. Actually, but it turned out that way anyway. I don't know if you thought of it at the time.
We'll give him credit.
Yeah.
So you started. What year did you start racing?
69.
69.
Yeah.
So Dave had sort of retired at that point.
Yeah, Dave, he just wasn't gonna afford it, and other things, life gets in the way, there's such things sometimes.
So you started in 69. Do you remember your first race?
I do. It was a heat race, and I finished second in my first race in a heat race, which I was pretty thrilled about that. But the old Oldsmobile, I don't know, it was a bad handling car. It's just didn't work out. I raced that thing for 2 years, and it never did much with it. And when we got the Dodge, everything changed. The Dodge was ended up finishing second points-wise in the circuit.
Okay. State
line in Aries. One position behind Maury Otander.
Okay.
So it was that was a good season.
Was this sportsman's also, or
This is the old hooligans. The hooligan class,
okay.
yeah. So
Yeah, and Maury, he won a lot of races.
yeah. I got into a race with him. I'll never forget it. I've forgotten most races. Okay, it's been so long, but I'll never forget that. We're out to Erie Speedway, and he was running second, and behind Tim Johnson. Yeah, that's right, Tim Johnson. And anyway, Maury was running second, and I was running third, and I think we'd gotten through all the traffic because I was points leader at the time. And I think it was like lap number 4 or something. We got up there fast. And so we raced door to door for the rest of the race for 20 laps. And he just got me just about a foot at the flagman. But I did, it was a great race.
Yeah.
Most fun, one of the most fun races I'd ever been in. didn't win. Even the one that some of the ones I didn't win were sometimes more fun, because of just the way it turned out,
You remember your first win?
I do. My first feature win was at Erie's, and I won the heat race, and there was a guy that ran a Ford up there. I can't remember him either, but he was real good. And he was right behind me in the heat race, and he couldn't catch me. And, well, because I had a Dodge, which is probably the only, I don't think there was any other Dodges. And everything was a few Fords, and most were Chevys. And so he couldn't believe he got beat by a Dodge. So him and his whole crew ran over and looked in the engine compartment, and so.
Wanted to break you down?
Well, no, they just looked at it and kind of shook their head and left. But then we got the feature, and I won the feature.
Yeah.
And I don't know where he finished. Probably not too bad. He was probably at least in the top 5 or so. So.
So who? Aside from Maury Otender and you, who were the guys to beat?
Keith Clark.
Yeah.
He was really good. He had a Pontiac, and Ron Stanko.
Yeah.
Ron Stanko was he was real good. The Gilbert brothers, they were fast.
Now, we're going to pause for a second there on the Gilbert brothers. We've interviewed one of them, Dick, before he passed away, and we knew of his reputation. And so I was wondering if that ever became part of your world, where the Gilberts, who had not the longest temper ability, or they could exercise.
Well, when I had the Oldsmobile, they thought nothing of hammering on the Oldsmobile, and bam, I don't know how many times those guys, I think it was Dick mostly, he would run right into it, bam, and the Oldsmobile looked like it too. We had to re-tin the whole back end of it. And so anyway, I didn't think that, I wasn't too upset with it. I just remembered it, Well, we were out here again, and it was in a heat race, and Dick, anyway, he spun out right in front of me. I thought, here's this great big target. Boy, I said, he got me 20 times, I'm going to get him once. So I nailed him hard and spun him around, and well, then we got into the pits, and he come running over. He was mad. And I'm standing there, and it hadn't been too many years since I was out of the Marines.
Yeah,
so I could handle myself, and he come running up, huffing and a puffing, and here's my friend, or my pit man, Gary Rowley, great big barrel-chested dude. And Dick looked at him, he looked at me, and he says, that's enough of this, and he took off. He didn't want to get into it, so. But that was my experience with Dick Gilbert.
Did you observe Dick or the other Gilbert brother, exercising their own muscle and temper?
That was the only time I had anything to do with it. I never got into it with Bob.
Yeah.
So
just the reputation that these guys had.
No, yeah, they were roughnecks. Yeah. So, but yeah, it was part of being in at State Line Speedway or Erie's, in the pits racing. We're all little nuts.
So you started in '69. You'd come back from Vietnam, and how long did you race, Keith?
Oh boy, well, I raced from '69 to '75.
Okay.
Just 71 I raced both tracks. 72 just state line. 73 just state line, and 74 just state line. Then 75 I ran both tracks, but I had 2 cars, and which were they were, let's see, in those days, 75, 74 and 75, they opened up the class to later cars. And I had a 66 Coronet with a 440 in it. So it was one of the reasons why I could race. The 440 engine, just in stock form, was a very powerful engine. You didn't need to do anything to them.
Right.
You know, so a little story on Leonard Briggs.
Please.
What a guy! I'm gonna tell you, he was kind of a guy that was really stickler for the rules. And anyway, I had a 64 Polara, and it was only supposed to have a 426. Well, there was very few 426s available. They weren't Hemis; they were wedge engines like the 440. So I just slapped a 440 in there, and started. That Polara was the best handling I ever had, and more than anything, it was just handling with that. And so one night, I won the race, and Otander finished second, which was usually was the other way around because it was Randy, you know. And anyway, Leonard, they had this thing you checked your pulled the spark plug out and checked the cubic inches, and one guy checked it and he says, well, it's 449. Well, I knew that wasn't right, you know, because it would have been 439 because it was a total stock engine. And so anyway, they were going to DQ me. Anyway, Leonard went over to Otander's car. They were going to tear down the first three, and he pulled his valve cover off, and I mean, it looked like a jewelry store in there, you know. Everything a 327 could possibly have. And, well, Leonard's boy, Craig, was running in that class. And that made Leonard mad. So Leonard comes back over. He says, let me recheck that. So he rechecks it, and he says, 427. He says, you're illegal. Because that he didn't think that was should be allowed to have all that, you know, all the high price stuff in that class, you know.
So he took a little liberty, did he?
He did.
Yeah.
He did. Yeah.
I'm sure you want to like that.
Yeah.
There's justice after all.
Well, it was. Yes. Yes. Leonard Briggs is justice. Yeah.
Any other stories about the Frank boys or anything like that you remember?
No, not so much with the Frank boys or even Lloyd Williams. Just had a lot of interaction with Leonard.
So what was a winning purse? Do you remember what you got paid?
$100.
$100.
Yeah. Which was, you only paid $5 to get in.
Yeah.
You know, and but I rarely got that $100.
Did you get paid for winning the heats and that as well?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit for the heats.
Yeah.
So.
After the race was over, did you guys get together? Was there a sort of a community of people, or did you kind of go your separate ways?
Well, speaking for myself, I know there was some other guys that hung out, you know, after the races, but I don't know. It was one of those deals. I was usually exhausted by that time, and I just wanted to go home, go to bed.
You had various classes, and you're in the hooligan classes. Mm-hmm. And did you guys intermix at all with the stock late models guys, or were they in a separate area of the pit? So they were away from us. Yeah, they were. Yeah. I do remember back in a little earlier. We had a guy from Russell. His name was Chuck Martin, and he was a good racer back in the day. And anyway, he decided he wanted to race, and Jim Scott built him a 61 Mercury. Yeah. And come to find out, Chuck's heart wasn't the best, so he didn't want to drive it anymore. So anyway, he didn't hire anybody, but they drove it for him, and it was a good car. It was a fast car. But there was a guy by the name of Brooks that was he was the lineup guy for that class,
And anyway, he didn't like him. In fact, he really didn't like him. So anyway, there was a lot of complaining about the lineup and everything. And then wasn't long after that, Chuck hired a professional boxer. And so this guy goes up there and, are you, I can't remember his first name, Brooks? The guy says, yeah. Well, he beat him to a pulp right there.
Really?
Right in the pits. So, of course, I got Chuck thrown out.
Yeah.
So, forever. So,
Oh, that's a great story.
yeah.
Well, there you go. What's the story? What's the question I should be asking you? I like this.
Well, I suppose the Ron Stanko incident would be a good one.
Sure, have it. Yeah. Love to hear it.
So, we're at State Line, and we were in a 40 lap championship race. And all I remember is I was racing that night. And anyway, Ronnie was leading the feature. And I don't remember what lap it was or anything like that, but he had a pretty good lead on everybody. And this guy with an old junk Ford, Ronnie tried to pass him on the outside. Not a good idea. Anyway, this guy ran him into the wall. It took him out. So, not funny for Ronnie. And so, the race is over. Don't remember where I finished. Don't remember everything about it. And I went up in the New York State side bleachers, where some of my relatives were. And all of a sudden I heard this noise, like there was a fire, popping and snapping and everything. And I turned around, I looked down into the pits, and here's this guy's car. His name was Porky Barnes. His car was rolled over, right on its lid. The gasoline was dripping out of the gas cap. And whoever it was lit a match, and went up and it was on fire. So I'm sitting there, what the world happened here, Well, wasn't too long after that, the Stankos got blamed for it. But it's never clear. There was never clear. They denied it. So.
That is a story. That's a good story.
Well,
had you heard this?
Yeah. So the rest of the story is Ron Stanko was leading the points in the hooligan class.
Yeah, he took it.
And Leonard Briggs tossed Ronnie and his brother Jerry out of the racetrack for the rest of the year and took away all their points.
Yeah.
So they did not end up winning the points. I believe the Otander.
Otander.
I think it was Randy maybe.
It was Maury.
Oh, it was Maury?
Yeah.
Maury ended up winning the points that year. And gossip has it that maybe the Otander boys were the ones that turned that car over and lit it on fire to get the Stanko boys in trouble. That's urban legend.
Well, two big old Tander boys could do that.
Well, they were way big enough. They were huge guys. They could have flipped that car over like it was nothing.
They deny it. The Stankos deny it. So I think it was a fluke of nature.
Yeah. But it was some crazy stuff.
Top that one. That's a great story.
Well, that's pretty much other than the boxing. That's pretty much about all I've got.
Any other questions I should be asking you?
Well, I did end up racing other tracks other than State Line area. I raced up the Little Valley for a little bit, not very long, and then after that I ended up at Allegheny Mountain.
Yeah.
I raced up there, a track outside of Kane,
Yeah.
and that's where I finished up.
Did you have any desire to do late models or anything? Was that kind of
Well, they were so much out of my financial
Yeah.
class, you know. I just stayed low, you know, the smaller. Did try to build a late model of the day, but I don't know, it didn't work out. And I sold it to my cousin. Actually, I ended up driving it a couple times for him
Did you, at State Line?
at State Line.
Yeah.
It was a Duster with a front end was a 64 Polara. The rest of it was a 57 Chevy. We married those two
Yeah.
frames together, but I don't know. I gave up on building it, and he finished it. Him and his friends, and he bought a great big engine from a guy by the name of Tim Johnson. He switched to Mopars,
Yeah.
and he had one built, a 440 that had. It was a massive, like for the day, it had at least 500 horsepower.
Right.
And when I couldn't believe it when I tromped on the gas, it just sat there and wouldn't go.
Yeah.
Just sat there and burned rubber. That's the only. One other one, I did drive a Challenger from a guy that was in Titusville. He was based in Titusville. Yeah, I drove his one night. And that was the only late model.
What'd you think of that? I mean, things are moving a little bit faster.
Yeah, you know, a lot of ways. It was still came down to handling.
Yeah.
It always is. It always will be. You know, it's you can have all the horsepower you want, and you're not. If you can't put it on the track, you're not going to do much.